Welcome back, me YouTube buddies. This is Infinite Roleplay because everything's awesome. Uh, Welcome back to Infinite Roleplay. Had an idea about how to talk about making massive monsters and many minions, and how to do it fairly easily without having to make a lot of changes to the monsters or placing dozens and dozens of minions out there where you have to keep track of hit points for each individual one, where you have to keep track of attacks for each individual one. Ways to do it quickly. I'll start off by making massive monsters. The easiest way to make a massive monster, or to make a big baddie, or to make a boss battle, or to make one monster look like it's the boss and stronger, and to do it simply and quickly, is to just take two monsters, is to simply take two monsters and describe them to your players as one. Let the monster make two separate attacks. Let the monster take the two damages, have damage bleed, just take it off the top. When it reaches one monster's health, the monster drops down to half effectiveness. And I'll describe it as this. In one game I did an improv. There was a troll. Now, the boss troll was actually two trolls that were described as being as one troll, but all the mechanics was two trolls. He made two attacks, two separate attacks with his sword. He could have made more with the claws and the bite and the multi-attack feature, but I didn't want to play it that way. He had a magical sword that he would swing twice in a round. I gave him double the hit points and in turn double the regeneration to make him a really tough boss monster. And all it was two separate trolls, mechanically. But thematically, in game, I just repped them as one single monster. That's the easiest way to do it. You want to throw goblins at people? I mean, we're going back to goblins, but goblins are tried, true, and killable by the droves. You want to throw goblins at people? Throw one boss goblin and just mechanically use two goblins, and then have that one boss goblin able to move twice as fast, able to attack twice as much. Maybe three, maybe even four. Make him bananas, like he's some goblin on speed. Then you could incorporate the thematics of having some sort of goblin brew be in the game that makes a goblin go crazy like that. You describe to your players that you see this short, green, large-eared, jaggy-toothed, smelly, just unkept creature covered in what seems to be layers of old grime and leaves and dirt, their clothes soiled from the neck down, walking around with a giant gourd or tankard or even a barrel on their backs that seems a bit too large for them to walk around with. And then before the fight begins, they turn around and they start just chugging. They pop the cork and just start chugging this brew, and it's splashing out of their mouths and foaming up and going across their bodies. And as they're drinking, their eyes are growing wider and wider and wider, maddening looking, and they toss their tankards or their whatever it is they're drinking from to the side, and then you see them breathing heavily and just looking with their eyes open wider than they possibly should ever get. The veins in their eyes just blood red, and their pupils tiny, almost disappeared, and their breath is just heavy. They're heaving, and you can see them shaking and tensing and just spitting out words incoherently. And you can have three of them, and in all actuality, mechanically be using groups of five goblins. And thematically, you're using three. So you have three damage bleed groups that are separate from each other. And you have each goblin being about 5 times stronger than a goblin should, because mechanically, it's five different goblins. Can you imagine throwing a goblin at your player like that and having it move 5 times as much, having it attack 5 times as much, and it's a single goblin, they're going to be insane. Like, looking at you, talking about what the hell is this? When is a goblin ever this strong? And it's just reimagining the thematics of a situation. That's how you make a massive monster, or make a boss battle or a boss monster, without having to go crazy about, making one from scratch, or picking a larger CR monster that you may not have wanted to throw into the encounter. Maybe you wanted to keep it all goblins, or keep it all ogres, or keep it all trolls, like every single one of them. And you just can't figure out how I'm going to do this when they don't have what I want in the monster manual. Now, ways to make many, many minions. In my big battles video, I discussed one way to do this for big battles. But recently, I was speaking to another DM player, and I came up with an idea that I thought was pretty interesting, and I thought I should share, which is making not necessarily traps and not necessarily spells, but something in the terrain, something in the scene that's dangerous. I used spike growth as an example. This is D&D 5th edition spike growth. For every X amount of feet you travel through the spike growth, you take Y amount of damage. You just take it. Right? And I'll just open up the spike growth right now and share the exact description, and then how I would reskin that description and make it into a monster. Or many, many monsters. Make it into just hordes and hordes of monsters. So if you look at spike growth, right? Make the duration permanent if you want, instead of a limited duration. But the ground in a 20-foot radius centered on a point within range twists and sprouts hard spikes and thorns. The area becomes difficult terrain for the duration. When a creature moves into or within the area, it takes 2d4 piercing damage for every 5 feet it travels. Okay? So, using that, reskin it as a horde of spiders. Just a horde of spiders. The entire terrain is filled with living spiders. You can stomp them, you can crush them, but no matter how many of them you kill, there always seems to be 2, 3, 4, 10 more to want to take its place. And you're traveling through an area of difficult terrain. And for every 5 feet you travel, you take 2d4 damage. Or you even take 1d4 damage. It only matters by how difficult you want to create the situation. And using those hordes of spiders crawling and climbing all over, your players and all over the ground, you can throw in some giant wolf spiders and a giant spider here or there. Leaving the fight to only be 1 or 2 actual enemies, actual monsters, and just thematically describing a horde, a sea of unending minions that in actuality is nothing more than an obstruction, a spell, or a terrain feature. And you don't even have to worry about keeping track of hundreds of attacks. You don't have to worry about keeping tracks of hundreds of initiative and hundreds of sets of hit points. That's all put to the side, made easier for you as a DM. It's almost unconscious. You just have to say, hey, it's difficult terrain. How much did you move? You roll a dice. Oh, 7 points of damage, 8 points of damage. And then the giant spiders are walking around, and the smaller spiders, the horde, parts and allows the giant spider to move through it freely and runs to your character and attacks your character. And you could theme that any way you see fit as well. Maybe you have a massive monster that is a reskinned version of 4 giant spiders, but you're describing it to your players as one huge queen, and you can see the eggs on the queen's back hatching, and this is where the unending horde of these smaller baby spiders are coming from. And the only way to stop the horde, the only way to overcome the situation, is to somehow make it to the queen and kill the queen. And then you succeed. And that's how you can combine the massive monsters, the boss monster, and the many minions, the terrain feature. That all it requires is a thematic reskinning. And you give something new to your players that they don't really know exactly what's going on, and they can explore the situation and experience the situation and feel maybe a little bit of tension and wonder, where they don't go, oh, it's just a spider, it has 30 hit points, we'll charge in and kill it like it's no big deal. Oh, there's spider swarms, somebody get a hammer, we'll just whack, it's dead. Let them come up with more creative ways to solve the problem, because they don't necessarily know the actual way to solve the problem. And that's just another set of ideas that I wanted to share. Hopefully it inspires some more thought and talk and video replies and posts and all that wonderfulness that this community is made of. So until next time, this is Infinite Roleplay. I've been Nelson. Peace.